All right. GM, GN, GA, all the G's to all the G's. This is We the Film3 Thursdays. Today we are doing our fifth workshop on So You Want to Be a Indie Filmmaker. And this one is starting production, crossing over in the threshold of production, many different ideas of crossing into, entering, thresholding production. A lot of this has to do with building on the previous, workshops that we've done. And this is at a point where there's a lot more of the things that need to happen to make the movie. More of everything before this is the planning stages to that. And this is more of the practicals getting into filmmaking. And we're going to try and explain the different matches and places where things like animation production and physical production and AI production kind of where they separate and where they meet. So there's going to be a lot of probably a lot more gear, probably a lot more jargon in these fields going on throughout this, but we're also going to talk about the why you do these things and why you look into these things. So it's just, it's at least my brief overview.
Yeah. If you've been following along, all the sessions are on podcast channels. The one from April is up as of this morning. It went live. It's linked above in the nest. It'll be on there indefinitely. Good series so far as I listen back to it and kind of discover what we talk about and present. I think it's making a lot more sense, not now, just like you said, we're in the fifth round of this. I think the planning sessions kind of come together decently, and the material, it's not as much of a surprise, I think, as maybe the first or second month. So hopefully it feels that way on the listener end too, that the production is, if not smoothing out, at least having a more evident trajectory.
Yeah. I mean, and this is the messy thing about creativity, is that everybody does it a different way. Everyone has a different way of making sauce. And the reason why these workshops are really, what I always try and express is a lot of how filmmaking, storytelling, creativity, a lot of how that all came to be was from one person to another, just, sharing a process, and how many filmmakers made it through other filmmakers' ranks, and they were, given all this context and process and how they saw things happen, how they were told things happen. And that's a big thing for people who just maybe haven't discovered a piece of the production that they didn't know they needed. There are so many things I could tell you from even physical production that somebody showed it to me and it was such a dumb, simple thing to do. And I was just like, I'll never do it differently ever again, like a clamping style or, a certain way of carrying things or a certain way of packing things. And there's all these different reasons why that happens. And then even in AI filmmaking, people tell me things all the time, or I see something new all the time that really just goes, now I know how to accomplish that shot, or now I have what I need to get there, what I need to say. So yeah, so that's basically why these workshops exist, is to try and continue on the story of creativity. But I think one of the important factors when you're starting to think about what you are doing as far as trying to get into any type of creativity, you have to get to a point where you need to ask yourself what where you want to be, as far as, do you want to be a professional or as a hobbyist, or are you even within a certain artistry, are you just documenting things that you see, or are you recreating that reality for people to partake in? And I think this goes through, all of creativity, because still life and stuff like that, through painting and even through photography, is something that could be very beautiful if, and it's not even framed. It's not even composed anyway except to be framed properly and to invoke that emotion through the framing. And then in painting, it's a lot of other situations. It's the hues, the different color choices, the style choice, sometimes even what it's painted onto, it kind of goes along with this. And with filmmaking, a lot of this is, documentarians have a really beautiful way of showing the world that exists. I'd say in some cases better than a filmmaker would, because a filmmaker will compose all the elements in front of his shot or her shot or their shot that invokes not just the emotion, but is supposed to put somebody in this reality. So there's a split between much of the profession where it's like, are you more of a videographer or a filmmaker? That's kind of evolved into this whole thing about content creator or filmmaker. But even though a lot of content creators, and this is the problem with film today in a very minor way, is that you can have something as cinematic on any platform you want using a plethora of ways to do it. And it's kind of the other hack about AI is that a lot of the best aesthetics that you could possibly use are being trained for these exact systems. So, there's this whole factor of even something that would be content is now at such high production quality that it kind of almost bridges the gap. It depends on the person. So there's a lot of value in understanding, though, where you want to fall in this. Like, because documentarians and doing it that way, like just capturing the world around you, there's a whole discipline to it. And I think even for AI filmmaking to be able to create that, there's a whole discipline to being able to intake the world in a way that's you're totally passive from it. And I don't know. It's a valuable question to ask yourself if you're somebody who is trying to figure out where your aesthetic is. And it's also important for when you're starting a production, because same thing with writing, same thing with a lot of different arts, like how you even do your shoot is very much attuned to this. If you think about shows like The Office, it's very much it's done in a real in a style that's supposed to be reality TV. And while it yields to the aesthetic of the show, there's the other aspect of how it's happening. Larry Sanders was also another show that kind of set that off. And did it in a way that was supposed to be, reality shaking a little bit, where you're like, am I watching something that's actually happening, or is this a show that's actually happening? And that, that could still be artistry as well. But the thing about it is understanding that aesthetic, even if it's something not permanent, is important.
For me, when I'm thinking about putting projects out, whether they're film or books or whatever, it's about allowing the momentum to build. What if that's like fiction, then you're going to be dealing with characters and the plot and pacing and stuff like that. Obviously, story is valuable. Narrative, if you're doing voiceover narration or if you're doing something more dialogue focused, you have to focus on those things too, right? But building up anticipation, this is something actually Jaji talked about. Maybe we did this session last year, but just kind of like between your viewer, your reader, and the unfolding of the narrative, that you kind of give them these, like, you seed these things for them to make predictions about and be rewarded for over the course of the story. So you build momentum for their anticipation of being kind of like having been astute readers or viewers of the material, that they sort of begin to expect an outcome that is harmonious, with what you've set up maybe earlier on in the narrative. And, again, you can do that whether that's fiction or nonfiction. If you want to talk about documentary, or you want to talk about, fantasy, sci-fi, whatever the case might be. I think that, like, you as the creator of those stories of that project want to be cognizant of creating that opportunity for your audience.
That's the new part of what it is to be a filmmaker is, and this grew over time, especially as technology has progressed, is a lot of times the auteur, the name filmmakers, people like Kevin Smith. Kevin Smith was interesting because he would write his stuff, he would act in his work, he would direct his work, and he was mostly doing the dailies, editing his work while on set. But he was only able to do the dailies on set because nonlinear editors like Premiere and at the time it was Avid. Avid was the program that enabled him to not just do these other two parts, but to do the third part even from set. And this is the thing about that storytelling is that what Michael is absolutely right about is there's this aspect with everything you can do everything. Not necessarily is everyone great at everything, but the thing about being able to tell that story from what you've recorded is now you can give that audience something different because you're using this style, but also trying to tell this story. And you could also do with that. I've seen filmmakers do. There's a lot of different documentaries that are, and Christopher Guest does this a bunch of times, like fake mockumentaries, where they have the documentary style, but it's an entire narrative happening in front of it. Best in Show is probably one of my favorite versions of that, just because it's so ridiculous and funny at the same time. It's an absolute delight. But this is the thing about choosing that, is that also in parts whatever the next question would be, which is how would you use that style, or what that style will do for what you want to make. And I think that's the kind of the value of trying to cross into this, is that when you're going into production, you need to understand at least this part to then start making, you've already made your decisions in pre-production, but then when production starts, there's new challenges that come about. And there's new things to completely throw you entirely off. And, the thing about, after you figure out what it is aesthetically you want to do, is that you go back to your pre-production, or you start going through your pre-production again, maybe as a second pass, and you start making decisions about what you can honestly make and what you can't. And the thing that will help you answer these questions and how you want to approach them is kind of what choice you make as far as how you're going to make this production. And this goes through, I think, every variable, whether it's physical production, animation, or AI, which kind of has this combination of the two in there. And it's, do you want to do this as a independent? Do you want to do this as a professional, as in with a studio or with a large entity? Or do you want to try and do a hybrid of the two and see what gets you as far as you can? Because there's ways of doing both. Many times films will go through some of those processes, get dropped, and then go through the rest of those processes and, become independent, or go the reverse way, which is start off as an independent and go studio, which is more common. But these things will matter as far as what your production will entail. Because each level, and I'll try and keep maintaining this throughout this talk, is that if there's a point where one of the levels will change the momentum of whatever you're doing, or the process of whatever you're doing, it's this, I'll try and highlight it. But independent, studio-based, or hybrid of the two, it's all a matter of like how you approach these things. AI does change some of that, which is why hybrid of the two can be something. But AI does make that third option kind of a whole thing, because you can kind of be animating something that looks like real life to then intend for it to be filmed that way. It's one of the great things about AI production. It's kind of something that I'm doing, is I'm making things that if someday somebody wants to syndicate it, then I'll be on set to do it. But I'm using AI to put that idea out there, because who knows? It's one of those things. It's every production is going to have these like unknown factors of whatever it's going to go. But I think where we have kind of established where to start off with this is and this is in every prospectus that film exists ever, is that the risk factor of what it is to make a film. And one of the first producers I was able to work with, I saw this page in the prospectus and I was like, why are we including this? Like, it's going to make them not want to invest. I was young. So, excuse me, I was probably about 20 at the time, maybe even younger. And the way he explained it, you have to, it's part of the rules. And then I looked up the rules and it was absolutely true. It's still true today. And that risk is not just for when you're looking for investors, but you look at it yourself, because most films fail. They fail in the terms that they usually don't return on their investment. There's distribution and all that could change the trajectory of that, but that's something for a different talk. As far as production, you have to understand that everything you're doing is, you have to enjoy it, because if you're not enjoying it and it's costing you money, you're doubling down on something very bad for you. So, taking on these risks and looking at the different ways that you can mitigate any of the risks that you're taking, things like all your resources as far as physical production. It's like, if you know somebody who has a sandwich shop and you need to make sure your crew is fed, the best thing to do is try and get a favor if you possibly can, and so on and so forth. But most of the things that you're going to need for production are going to end up costing somebody something, whether it's a favor or most of the time it's cash, money, tender, whatever. So you need to understand what it is that you could possibly put into this production, whether it's, even if it's invested, because then you're running a budget. So it's in another whole realm of like worrying about how much things are going to cost. If you're lucky enough on a big production to get a producer that signs on, they'll mostly be handling the budget and how this all logistically works. But if you're a filmmaker, you're going to be involved probably everywhere, because I've not met many above the line staff that didn't have the same concerns, because it matters, of what the producer had. So these risks, even though you're not essentially taking them on, you do have to understand the parts of them, because since you're not the one with the money, the studio can pull out at any time if they don't think this is worth it. And many times it happens. Many times it happens in development. So if you're lucky enough to make it to production, really understand where all those different entities are coming from. And then as far as animation and AI, it's kind of the same realm, but it's different understanding of what is the outcome of that. When you're talking about animation, you've already had all the pre-production done and put into the pipeline to start being animated. In AI, you're probably making images and putting those images together on a mood board or in a file or something and starting to use them to initialize whatever the video you want. There's all these different factors as to what it is for animation and AI that enable you to get a little bit further down this line and not take on as many risks. Not to say that there isn't any, because compute costs money, and that is a universal for pretty much everything. You can do a lot of things for free, off of free credits, whatever somebody will give you. To do a production in that way would probably take several years to make a very short sequence, but it also depends on what it is you're making. But it still costs money. Seed Dance, I think, is still something like $3 to $7. I think it's 15 seconds. It's like $7.
Hey, I mean, production is going to take time either way, so you're going to be in for the duration if you're going to make anything sizable. Regardless, it's probably going to take years to make a feature, unless you're just a total savant, can like bang it together. Hey.
Yeah, or have the infrastructure to do so.
Yeah.
If you're by yourself, it makes total sense that it would take you a very long time to make one film, especially a feature. But, there have been productions that are very fast, 30 days, 60 days, but that's a studio machine pushing everything through.
Which is fair to assume, because they should be able to basically produce at industrial scale.
Exactly. And that's the thing that you you stand at an edge of when you're doing a big production. You're there, but you're watching that machine take in what you do, and you are taking in what it does. It kind of transfers on both sides. But no matter what, the things that are the things that are universal, um, through each of these processes, you still need to have realistic goals and deadlines to be able to do any of this stuff. And when you get to those, when you get to those different levels, whether it's yourself or if you're in a studio system, those schedules and those deadlines, they're either made outside of you, or you are making them yourself. If you are vying for film festivals, you got to look at all the dates for the film festivals to be complete by, and then you make sure you're complete by then. If it's about pitching to certain companies, you look at film markets, and you look at when they stop doing submissions, or when you can stop, whenever the last moment you can possibly put it to attend any of these things, and you need to be done, locked, and ready by then to have your elevator pitch ready to rock. Even if you've already made the film, this is also the idea of like your timelines and your goals have to be realistic. Cannes is a very difficult festival to win at. Be realistic of like, well, maybe your deadline should be something more attuned to what it is you're making, maybe a horror film festival, or maybe it's, towards a channel that's going to be more supportive. Make these deadlines realistic, because your production should not suffer for your deadline. You should be supporting your production with your deadline. It should be able enough to handle everything you need to do and then some. And you should also be very fluid about this, because the thing about production is it will always take longer than you expect. It is a surprise when something is quick. That is regardless of all production I've been part of. And then, even with just all those realistic goals and deadlines, like, you need to, especially as a solo creator, have people who are supportive around you and keep you accountable to that goal and deadline. Like, I'm a day over, and I'm probably going to end up being 2 days over on this short. But
what?
Yeah,
it's done.
It's not done.
Okay,
it's never done. But it will be done. The thing about it is that you need to have that around you, just because I'm dedicating myself to not going completely off the rails. But it is something that you need to have around you to make sure that you continue driving down your road. And I also think you need to have that around you audience-wise to be able to understand these things. Like, audience-wise, I mean even probably a little less tighter than your inner circle. Like, you can have kind of beta watchers. You can have, like, group chats of people that you do appreciate, and you do like their input on things. You need to have these different varying rings around you of these community accountability, people to keep you up on what it is you want to do, because anybody could want to do anything. And that's where embracing that experimentation and learning, but using that to be accountable and have people help you do that. That's a really big thing about starting this out, is that if you have a good system for yourself as a creator, especially the more solo you are in this process, it is something that if you have all of that, you will do at least what you want to do. And I'm not saying you'll get to your goal. I'm just saying you'll at least do what you want to do, because all those things will either help you or show you how you shouldn't.
That's an interesting point too, is the more things I've made, the more, I guess, different avenues of creativity I've gone down, the more I've realized how much this stuff I make is never really made in a bottle, alone by myself. I might be doing a lot of work, but it's always, particularly I think with music, if you're playing in bands, that becomes very evident. I think if you're making a film, it becomes very evident. If you're writing, while you're writing, that's very solo oriented, but really to like take a book all the way to market and do all of the little pieces that might go along with that along the way, that is definitely a team effort. And like, even if you are an indie writer, all the way through, the process, maybe you're getting into podcasts, maybe you're still even doing live signings, maybe you're hiring editors, maybe you're hiring designers for covers or promo stuff or videos or whatever the case might be. The further you go out, I think, and kind of establish your work in the field, the more you're discovering, like, I'm not operating in a vacuum by myself in any means or by any means for any of the projects that I do, personally.
Yeah. I mean, the thing about community and communal, and it's supposed to help you do this better. And it's only through other people, because realistically what you're doing is supposed to go out to other people. If you're making it for yourself, you don't need anybody. Go make what you want, and it's one of those things that if you make it to a point where you can just make whatever you want, then great. And this is where AI has its other power, which is your audience is only as much of a consideration as you really want them to be. You don't have to consider them if you don't care about your audience and you just want to give them something cool that you think is awesome. And I think that's where but if you care about the content of whatever it is you're doing, there's all of this other part of how do you use that? Like, what does that do for what you're doing in production? And this is kind of going back to the kind of the style thing and making understanding of what that is, as far as like what it is you want to aesthetically do, what it is you want to style wise, as far as the genre of what it is you're making. There's all these ideas about that and how you can use this base with those decisions in mind, and what that could mean for building momentum going out far and pushing this out further. Whether it's about making all the meat and potatoes for your shoot and making sure the production is solid, and these decisions, and with this base, you can get to these parts of production and really push on from there. And those concepts will help you make your film, and or make your piece. That's the other thing about it, is like, if it's not a film you're making, if you're just really documenting something, this whole group of everything to support you on doing this is also quite different. Your realistic goals and your deadlines are all dependent on whether this thing that's real is happening when you feel like not telling the story anymore. This is also where AI does bridge, is because, like, right now I'm very deep into this episode where I'm way over time that I want to be for wherever I want to for where I wanted to originally end, and that's why any moment I really need to just stop.
You mean runtime?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I thought it was getting pretty toothy.
Long in the tooth. But this is the thing about understanding where your schedules are going. It's that you then need to understand what your runtime is going to be, because if you don't intend on ever finishing telling the story, then your runtime is going to be out of whack. And building that momentum from all of this, it will help yield. They will get very congruent to each other. Is because if you're doing a documentary, it's so much easier to understand who will be on your side, whether or not, and who will be able to help you promote. Sometimes who will even help you with production, because there are certain charities that are very connected to the film world and will help you with production and will help you continue to do production. Panavision has a whole rental grant that you can rent Panavision equipment if you apply. And if you're doing a documentary, a lot of the time, if it's aligns with their company's values, like they'll give you Panavision equipment, which it sounds great, but to be honest, Panavision equipment you really need the crew to be able to handle that. You as a solo creator, if you had a Panavision camera and lens, you would be completely overwhelmed very quickly. I don't even know if you'd be able to set it up properly without probably hurting yourself. It's a lot of very heavy equipment. They're very expensive. Like, I mean, having to watch things that are having to make sure no one steals something that is practically priceless and you have, you have authority over would be fucking scary. But this is the thing about whatever it is you're creating and building that momentum. It depends on whatever it is. In certain stories, even if it's fictional, certain stories would align with other industries. And this could be for AI as well. If you are doing like some of the things that I'm pitching lately is being able to give a company like this idea where if you put me in the CPP for a limited amount of time, I'll make this project using your software or using your site. And nobody's gone for it. But the idea of them being the production house, it kind of yields to where a lot of these companies were to go, and Runway is getting there in a certain kind of way. But this is the thing about production for AI is that if you are needing of credits on a certain system, then you are beholden to the idea that maybe that system would want to support you in that way.
That's a good point that you raised, because this is something that I've budgeted out. Like, think about the daily historical facts. Like, I've got half of that, so I've got 6 months of that project produced over the course of, gosh, like 2 years it took me to do it, right? So that was not daily creation either. But like, if you're budgeting out how much it's going to take, I have that written down somewhere in my notes. I'm not sitting at that desk right now, but the idea that, it's going to require this many produced minutes of footage. How long does that take? How many shots are going to be throwaways? I kind of know, typically how many are going to be just no good, and then the ones that are going to be getting saved and utilized in the collage effort for that stuff. And I have future plans for that. Some of the clips are probably going to need to be reshot in the future if I ever really want to do anything serious with a lot of that stuff. But just kind of thinking that way about budgeting generative compute for the projects that we have, I think is important too, because like, even with what you're doing right now, they're shorter episodes, but as you're stacking it all together, and then you're looking at how much it's going to take to do the entire series of shorts, and then to put them together, and then what it might take to kind of stitch up the episodes together into something, if that's what you choose to do with it. I think that it becomes very informative about budgeting on even projects as simple as stuff like this, where it's not, these are not huge projects. These are very niche, but like small projects that aren't, aren't incredibly demanding. It's not like they have a huge crew of people working on it. Chris is working on it, or I'm working on it, or we're working on stuff, and it's not necessarily, I wouldn't say like crippling this system with its demands. But yeah, budget stuff out. Think about it. It's important. I'm doing it a lot because like I'm kind of bouncing between all these platforms where I have handfuls of credits here and there, and I'm trying to produce promo material for the releases that I have, but then also I want to work on new stuff. So luckily I'm getting into some different programs now and able to get access to credits and hopefully work on a short that I've wanted to make for a long time, actually. And I think like being able to get that out the door, that would be really satisfying, but also to work on, some of the other video projects that I want to get into, new original stuff that has never seen the light of day, but you got to budget it.
Absolutely. And I think and this is the same thing about physical production. You need to budget your time, especially with that, because not even shooting takes a lot of time. Shooting almost takes the least amount of time. And it's the same reason why when clips in AI started hitting 5 to 8 seconds and it was consistent good video, there was a huge boom in a lot of what was created, because most of the time, and like you'll shoot several lines in succession, sometimes with the same person who's giving the opposite line, sometimes not. But those will be in seconds. The A/B conversations are like 5 to 8 seconds and then cut, 5 to 8 seconds and then cut, 5 to 8 seconds and then cut. You got to think about how conversation works when you're listening to somebody speak and then you speak back to them. It's one of the things why AI has kind of exploded this way, but budgeting that time is very important, because sometimes with AI, you're not going to get the shot you want, or the background's going to completely screw up, or if it's happening in the backseat of the car and the car has to be parked, you're never going to be able to get it fucking parked, because that happens. I did the video taxi that I did. Getting the guy to talk in the back seat while the car was parked was a near impossibility. I prompted a dozen different ways, used different generators, and almost never would they give me a parked car. And when it was parked, there was another problem. And this is the same thing on physical productions, because even the same idea, getting somebody in a parked car to sit at the side of the road and get the shots to be consistent, you have to do a lot of coverage. It's very difficult to do that on location. You're better off doing it on a set or in a sound stage. But now budgeting your time is another whole thing about trying to get your time budgeted properly, so you can do this, so you can do that, and then this is where your system will kick in, because while you're budgeting your time and you're starting production and you're starting into this process, your system should be supporting you along the way. Should be asking like, hey, how's that going? What's going on with that? Where are you at? Did they accept the deal? If it's a bigger studio production, whatever, getting to that. That momentum will help you keep going forward. Them pushing you and you pushing back at it, and then taking that idea and keep going with it. Especially if you're a solo creator, you really, like, I'm trying to be as open about my process, and these spaces are part of it. So it's one of those things that going and talking about this, tweeting about it, whatever on X it is, not tweeting, whatever, posting about it on Facebook, making videos about it, opening that content up to enabling people to really partake in your process, whatever closeness you want it to be. Even if it's just, hey, like, I'm doing this, I'm awesome. You don't even have to go granular. I like going granular because I'm a gearhead. So it's like, if I was doing this, like, I saw a picture of somebody who's on a supposedly a commercial set, and all the cameras were DSLRs. And I remember when I first started out, that type of production was frowned upon. Like, by the time DSLRs came into being common, I was already on my way out, and cinema cameras were still reigning supreme. But this is the other thing about production, is that you need to also understand the tools you need to make that work. And budgeting your time to make sure those rentals are key. If you're not renting, you're buying, and then budgeting your budget for that type of thing. It's another whole system on top of a system. I mean, and this is even with AI, it's another whole system on top of a system. If you're shooting it, with let's say with a cell phone camera, and then utilizing like style transfer, you're now doing the budgeting of time of a physical production, and then also the budgeting of time for the VFX part, which is trying to get that style transfer to stick properly. And now you've just literally screwed yourself on both ends as far as time budgeting and how much it's going to cost, because you're using the most physical part of it, having to get a location, even if it's just something that doesn't, a gray box is what they call it now, and then having to use some of the best style transfer to make sure that that's worth it. It really does make the value, no matter how you slice it, just that much more. But this is also why making any of these decisions on your style and what you really want to be is important, and having that mindset be straight for whatever it is you want to do, it's valuable. Because there's also the thing about videographers, that it's widely considered to be more of the hobbyist part of filmmaking. Even filmmaker is kind of like taken a bit of a watered down meaning. Where if you're, I call myself a filmmaker, but honestly, I've made 2 films, short films. That's about it. I financed them myself, wrote them myself, edited myself, shot it with crew. It wasn't just me; it was me, cast, crew. We had Crafty. We had rented a location both the times. Did a one location shoot. It cost thousands of dollars, and I've never seen a dime in return from it. But it's one of those things that I made two films. It's I know filmmakers who have made no films. I know filmmakers who have said that they have pitched to every major in this godforsaken land, and they've gotten nothing from it. So the thing about understanding where you want to go with that, I think, is uh, kind of your tolerance for punishment. Because if you go more professional, it's more no's than yeses. If you stay as a hobbyist, at least you can chase after your metrics, your audience directly, which is still, there's a lot of flack for that too, because the peanut gallery exists. It's never going to stop. But either of these mindsets are going to make you understand where it is you want to branch out to. If you want to stay as a hobbyist, then maintaining your community, maintaining that, expanding those tight circles even further. Markiplier is a really big example of this because he just kind of turned the corner as far as indie filmmakers are concerned. Made a film for 3 million. I think it grossed 50 million. It had theatrical release. He bypassed the studios, did distribution and marketing himself through his own community. And it really is like one of those things where it went from very tight, where I remember that dude just getting microphoned in the face over and over again, to now he's helmed a major film, and major in the sense that it made money majorly. It more than 10x, it almost 20x its budget. It's a really, really positive move, and it's going on YouTube, where the ultimate distribution goes back to his community. And that's something that is part of this decision, because even major studio, you'll get your nose until you find out that that community that you've already built for yourself might support you through something, even if it's something very small. It's totally possible. But all of this yields what type of production you're able to do. The reason I'm using AI to do the production that I want is because until I get a budget to do so, I don't want to try and get favors from people that I can't repay. So now my tour de force is to try and make the visuals, see if a concept catches on enough for people to then go further and get budget and see if that goes somewhere. Or just make the product and give it out to the world and maybe make an addition to it later. That's the aspect you have to decide. What professionality you want to do, if at all, monetization basically. And if that is something that you want to achieve, how you do that is also up to you. Because you can monetize as an independent, you can monetize as a studio production. Either of those have their checks and balances, have their ups and downs, have their ways of getting in. None of them are ever the same. Everybody I've ever met that's gotten a good thing happen, it's never been a too similar story. It's always like very specific to that person, that time, that instance, that mood, that just general happenstance that happened that got them to that location, that got them to that deal. So, but making sure you're in those conversations is the only way they happen. You miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So it's one of those things that if professional is where you want to go and putting yourself in those situations is what you want to be, that's where you need to head. And if not, then, otherwise.
This is something that I had put on my personal roadmap like early in the year, maybe even late last year, was to pursue broader distribution for my books, to basically put existing releases onto marketplaces where they did not yet exist. I just have at this point like enough data about a handful of the releases being kind of like the overperformers or the standout titles, and I think making them available in more places is the way to go. So I've started to go back through and just did the first kind of wide release on one of those. I think that's part of another discussion about catalog management and making sure to kind of like pursue all opportunities for the work after it's complete as well. And I don't want to get too deep into that, but I think that it at least to think forward through production into kind of what the outcomes are is not necessarily a bad idea at the outset, which is where we are for today too. Like you kind of have to see the goal, visualize it, and then see yourself moving in progress toward it.
For sure. And I mean, this is something that I do currently. Like Detective Banana, the only reason why it's at the top of my list of things to do was because the treatment, when I wrote it, when me and my friend Nicole wrote it in 2010, like we had submitted it to a bunch of people at that time, and that we had also submitted a couple other things we shot, things we wrote. We were kind of trying a bunch of different avenues, and internet video had kind of just been in this like weird build moment where it was like things were kind of happening. And out of the stack of things that we gave them, Detective Banana actually came through as something that they really liked. The concept we had, the only difference in the concept we had was we were going to shoot everything, and I was going to wear a rather ridiculous banana costume that was going to be packed and filled up so that fill out the banana, because those costumes they don't come pre-filled. You have to fill them up. And we were set to actually shoot that at some point in 2011, and unfortunately things didn't work out. But that's the reason why I kept it at the top of my pile. Whenever there was a time where I could pitch something, I always used to pitch that as part of one of my lists. And then when it came to like thinking about where I want to be with AI, I was like, well, I still have this concept. Let me see if the images can at least get through the system. If I could find these characters in AI, like if I prompted enough. And I did. And this is the thing about where you've built on from your pre-production and your planning and even into production. You have to just build on the systems that work. If there's something that's not working, try and build something either different or build around it. None of that is different throughout filmmaking or AI filmmaking. I've made shot lists that I've not used 90% of. Storyboarding, forget it. Like I paid for storyboarders 3 times. 2 of the productions that I did, I paid for storyboarders. I used nearly none of them. Some of the major shots I did, and I realized how much I shouldn't need storyboarding anymore. I just thought it was the first time I was just too inexperienced, but the second time I was like, no, this is stupid. I'm only going to use stick figures and shot lists. Like storyboarding is not something that works for me. And that's the other part about it. Figure what works for you, because the worst thing is being on set and something that you think is going to work is not working. And now changing sometimes a major situation is very difficult. Location change. I've seen directors do this where they wanted to go to location B to shoot whatever we already shot from location A. And they felt like the dialogue would work better from the bridge of these 2 scenes. And like we would get to location B and it's still not working. So now the dialogue that probably was the problem to begin with, and the actors trying to do it properly, is now the more difficult part that we should have just cut and moved on from. And now we've spent all this time reshooting something we already knew didn't work. And now we're doing it again and wasting even more time. And the same thing like AI. Like I just figured out that you cannot use the term brass knuckles on runway, because I've just tried to prompt something a million different ways. Brass knuckles was the term that was giving me the most problems. So it won't be the prop that I will use for this very next scene, even though it's in the scene previously. Whatever. You got to make changes where you need to. Figure out what your systems are available to do and do that. This could also mean a physical production, traffic, parades, things that just happen ambient that you have no idea about. Just always try and figure out what it is you need to do with your productions. And then, this also goes to the fact of where you want to be professionally, because if you're independent, call in favors, get who you can, pay everybody, feed everybody, keep everyone safe, obviously. But do it lackadaisically. You don't have to have a tight schedule if you're not beholden to a studio. You should have a schedule and stick to it, just because it works for the people who are working with you as well, to know that at these goalpost things will be happening. But, if you're more professional, that will only help you even more, because the person that does that on a set, like a first AD or some of the producers who do scheduling, and the first AD who's supposed to run the set for the day, having any of these ideas in mind that things will happen in this certain progression will help you there too. Because even if it's not your job to do it, you have to fit into the system that's already in place and already rolling. It's one of the best things about being on set is if you're a very good middle person, you can really mitigate a lot of problems between the different departments and whatever's not working. Because that does happen. Even people who work well together, there's just things that happen on set. Set's a very chaotic place. It's like you're putting out a fire but setting a fire at the same time. So this is the big thing about production, is that you're going to be overwhelmed. It's going to be very difficult. So there are going to have to be changes made, improvisations, all kinds of things that need to happen in these instances. But how you approach this in your professionality about it will also allow for either the more tightness on one end, if you need it to be tight, to be out by a certain time within budget and everything like that, or the kind of looseness and relaxedness of doing it when you're not beholden to a studio. This could be in physical, AI, or animation. Any of those different ways of making a piece of work, the more professional you want it to be, or the less professional you want it to be, as far as the production on it, will yield what it is scheduling and how this all works out. And, keeping it real for all that is extremely important. Now, after you've kind of gotten to this situation of what it is you want to make and how you're going to make it, if you're not at a point of figuring out what that audience looks like, there's another whole discussion about that, but there's something that you need to always keep in mind, is that while you're making whatever you're making, there's somebody that ultimately has to watch this stuff. And understanding how they're going to figure it out, how they're going to accept it, how they're going to absorb it is extremely important when you're doing production. Because if you're by yourself, the thing that art department does, that a lot of the production designers do, is they keep continuity and stuff like that. But doing that by yourself is very difficult. And that's physical, animation, AI. Like, consistency is very difficult in AI. It's also very difficult in person, because you never can really tell if something has changed in a space. If you've seen it a million times, or if you're staring at it through a monitor, there's blindness that happens. And I've had it where it's not been my job, but there's something that somebody will walk into a shot and be like, did anyone notice that this cup was on the other side for the shoots before this? That somebody literally just switched where the cups were, and now we don't have continuity from the things we shot before this change. And there's a famous thing that Kevin Smith in Cigarettes, in I think it was Dogma, or it might have been in Clerks. I don't know. One of the films he made, there was this whole thing that he was smoking the cigarette, and if you look at each time they cut to and from, the cigarette is a different length. And then you can be really crazy to talking about cigarettes. You could be really insane like Kubrick and have a continuous shot that you utilize, that you scare the bejesus out of Shelley Duvall, to have a scene where this cigarette ash is getting longer and longer and longer, and possibly longer and longer. And the continuity is like nearly perfect, so those things are instituting whether you can be really crazy about these things or not. But the idea of what your audience will be watching is something you need to keep in mind. It's the reason why, like, if something in Game of Thrones or if Mandalorian, there's a water bottle or a coffee cup in the shot, try and understand what your audience is looking at and what they're going to allow for you to do and what they're not. It's not about not making those mistakes. It's not about being perfect all the time. It's about understanding what that audience will accept. Somebody like Ralph Bakshi, who, if you don't know his animation, you should definitely look it up. Like, the imperfections of that artistry made that artistry look better. It almost like yielded to that look of whatever it was that it was trying to convey. And it's one of those things, like, his audience was very accepting of whatever it is imperfect about any of those sequences would be, because it's just the same ideas coming through. So it's not about being ultimately perfect. It's always about understanding what your audience will tolerate, what your audience will want, what your audience will. Oh, sorry, I got a phone call. What your audience will ultimately accept. Um, and the other aspect of this that you need to always keep in mind is the time it takes to make anything, because this is the biggest part of production is time management. Like, if you're doing this by yourself, really understand that every moment you have to put towards making your film, you have to take away from something else. um, there's all kinds of methodologies on this. There's the spoons, where you only are allowing yourself so many spoons of activities to do, or so many spoons of things to have to deal with, and something has to be let go of in order to fill a spoon. There's people who do all kinds of different methodologies on this. You can do on your calendars. You could try and block it out. Like, I'm lucky enough that I get 5 or so hours a day most days to just dedicate towards filmmaking, especially now that I'm taking on less client projects. So now it's towards gaining an audience, figuring that out, and pushing towards that. And I block that time out as much as I possibly can, where there's not something else going on, because I run a household. But that's what you have to balance between, and that could be almost the most difficult part. There are people who completely quit because of the time management problems. There's a meme about this, where even if you're on a production, you're hanging out with somebody on set, you get along really well. You start talking about meeting up after everything's over, and you start looking at each other's schedule, and everybody is doing something wildly different. And you can even be in the same city doing something, but your next 2 weeks, like, you have to do a 5 a.m. shoot, you have to do a sunrise shoot, and it's like, oh well, I'm doing a sunrise shoot, and I really, I'm going to have to be there at dawn, so I have to be up by 2. So I'm not even doing that, and then I'm doing another one the day after, and then I'm doing a really late shoot. And by the time you figure out a time where you're not either needing to sleep to make up for all the other sleep you didn't get, or something isn't going on that they don't have the same problem, like, it could be months, sometimes over a year, depending on what that person is. And that's not uncommon. It's just not. Um, it's also why many fields, same with film, it's very incestuous as far as people within that industry being with each other, because it's so much easier to explain to somebody, like, hey, I have a really difficult schedule, and they just get it. I also came from another industry that's very much like that, just because they just get it. So time management is a really, 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 really big process, especially when you're talking about making something. Because what you're taking from something else, you have to add to this, and then when this happens, you have to make it as rich as possible. And problems will come up, things will expand. I'm a day or two over, because not just did I have problems at home that needed to push production further, but the production itself, the tools that I use, had issues.
I think there's another thing about scheduling and time management, and maybe delivering to audience expectations, which is to say that you might want to think of things as different sizes of releases. Like, if you're a band, you might put out some singles, you might put out an album, you might do a tour, you might put out like a merch collection, all kinds of different things that you do, or put out a video to kind of engage with your audience, or to showcase the music, or just the various activities or whatever, allow audience to participate in what you make in different ways. I think that that's something that's important too. So you probably don't want to always be kind of like putting all your eggs in one big basket and disappearing for long periods of time. It's probably better to work on stuff that has kind of like different demands and delivery kind of workouts, I guess. Because what's required for film to go into streaming distribution versus like what is required for an album of music or an NFT project or a book. These are all different sets of skills and different sets of media that are going out onto different rails of distribution too. And you have to be cognizant of like what people want to participate in at certain points of the year. I'm kind of starting to discover some of that, or like what they do participate in heavily at certain points in the year. I don't know. You have to be doing things for a while to discover that, and you also have to be putting out a lot of different stuff to discover that. So I don't want to say that like I have any definitive view, but it's something that I'm trying to perceive more now.
And this is something that, especially in film, has come up as being an aspect of making something if you're making it for a major studio, because they love if you want to be as open and as completely visible as possible. And if you're doing this by yourself, you really should be as open and visible as possible. You should be talking about when you're going into production. You should be talking about how that's going. And you should be very positive about it too. Because once again, something, even if it's a company that's giving you AI credits, they're imparting whatever they could onto you that they could have given to somebody else. And if it's somebody working with you in physical production, they're taking their time to be around you and to do things that you are either the head of or want to partake in. So it's always good to be positive about it, even if things are difficult. Difficulty is part of the job. It's all part of the job. But the thing about being very open to the world about this, it only helps your situation. It only makes people either empathize more with your product and make them more invested in how that product is created and maybe how that product ultimately finishes. And you might make along the way some fans or, some people that will help you with your journey. That's the other thing about being open about it. I mean, I got more PAs the second time around when I made a short than I did the first, because I had already kind of put everything out about the first one and how difficult it was to find people. And more people reached out, more people came and show up, and I needed PAs for the day because I couldn't afford some other major parts of the production. But a PA that knows how to kind of do some of this stuff, if you provide the equipment, will be able to get paid whatever the rate that they want to do additionally for whatever it is. And, it's just a little bit less than what you would have to pay somebody professionally to do. But the other part of it is if you just need it to happen. And this is the thing about where you want to be with production, is that you need to understand what that aspect is for you. Important audio is important, but, is it important to get it that great? If you capture it properly, if you get enough that just works for the scene. And it's the same thing with AI. If you find a way that the line works, no matter if it's kind of said in a weird, inconsistent way, sometimes that means the difference between finishing a project and not. I've had to make decisions like that recently. It's just a matter of, does it work? It just works. So utilize it. And I think this is where, the roles you want to take with how you do this is kind of important to whatever it is that you ultimately finish with it. And if you're doing this by yourself, there is no role that is, you don't touch on. But as you get into the more professional parts of this, these roles will end up kind of boxing you into a decent part of what that production's requirement is of you. And when you're starting production, you also want to understand what these roles look like in case you need to hire out, in case somebody comes along and wants to be a collaborator. If they really want to collaborate heavily, what is their position that would help them support you best? And knowing those positions, even if it's not something you intend on ever hiring for or ever doing, it's always good to kind of know what the positions do in general senses, just so you could understand how somebody can help you. And there's guidelines to all this that go back for, God, probably about 100, maybe a little more than 100 years at this point, because a lot of these roles have not changed. And even if their kind of modalities of how they work have changed, they all still pretty much stay the same. So if you're a solo person, like, it doesn't matter how you write your stuff, you produce your stuff, you shoot your stuff, you edit your stuff. Like, and even big auteurs do this. Robert Rodriguez does this. Kevin Smith does this. Lots of them. John Carpenter even scores his own movies at times. So it's one of those things that, but knowing what those roles are used for, or what those roles could mean for your production, is valuable. If somebody wants to come on and you don't, you're at a point where you don't know where you want to go with something, you're having problems in more of the writing process, having a co-writer or somebody to write that with you is extremely helpful. But if it's somebody that is more visual and has better capabilities with prompting, maybe they're another person who uses AI and they just know how to prompt these certain shots better, maybe that could be something where they become your cinematographer in a way, where they're making the visuals. We had that situation with Project Astral with Neil. Neil made a lot of the imagery that we needed for the film, and we ended up using all the stuff that we needed and generated the video ourselves and did a lip sync and stuff like that. Where we had our own sequences, whatever blended this whole movie together was done by somebody who had his own sequence as well. But they also were the unifying concept that kept the film running. I would signify Neil as being the cinematographer or the visual artist for a lot of that film, and then each sequence would have their own credits as who made that sequence. And that's the thing about understanding that, is that now where to fit that into. Producing is another role that is interesting, because it can go in a lot of, if you find somebody who you want to work with who's in a very general way, like they have input on creative, they have input on production, they have input on distribution, they have input on scheduling. They're very much a generalist as far as whatever it is they want to help you with. That's a producer. It goes as far as some producers are there to even raise money. There will be producers who do not do that, but will make sure that the film gets made in a production sense. And then directing is another whole aspect, where if you're in a physical production, a director has a lot more importance than in an AI production, and a little bit less importance when it's an animated production. Animated productions, obviously, they're directing voice actors, and they'll also be directing some of the animation part of it. But in an AI type of way, it's only to kind of help you understand maybe how an actor should say something a little better. And if you have somebody who's just there to help you with that type of context, sometimes their ability to help you prompt might help you. But a director, in a lot of senses, is not as useful in the AI sense, just because a line delivery is a line delivery. If you get a good one out of the generator, you should really just hold on to it. Like, just thank your lucky stars. But knowing these roles and what they mean for you, like, a producer is probably the most important role in all of them, just because that person will help you get through all these different stages of production. And even if you're in production, they'll help you get to beyond what you need. They'll give you input on all sorts of different things for your script, for your creative, and all this other stuff. And ultimately will be a really useful component all the way throughout. The thing about that is it will either come from your community or you'll reach out for it. This is why being visible as far as everything you do is very important, because that could mean somebody would sign on as a producer for that work. There's been many times that, even for something like Pulp Fiction, like, it was Danny DeVito got the script in his hands and decided to be a producer on it. And then he was executive producer, because I think he was one of the major financiers to it at the very beginning. And first is almost better than more. As far as those productions, he was first money on. So he got probably the cleanest deal, and then everybody else kind of signed on with afterward and had to get their own deals. So, that's the thing. It was just a matter of somebody handing the script to Danny DeVito that ultimately got that film made, even though he wasn't the most amount of money in. having that type of influence, be a producer on that piece of work, was very important. And that could mean the same thing no matter what the production is: animation, physical, or AI. All of it works. But this thing about writing. Writing is also a really important aspect because screenwriters are known for their craft. AI isn't very good at screenwriting, in my opinion. I haven't seen really that great. I've seen a lot of tries on it, and there would be good beats and changes and inflections, but human writers are still, as far as dialogue, as far as how to space out a script, they're still far better. So writing could be a really interesting aspect to get somebody involved in, because it could help you prompt, it could help you run dialogue and everything you need with that. And it's, that's another important one that almost no matter what will help you. Especially if you're not a very strong writer, if you don't think you are, or if you don't really like any of your writing, which I hate my writing, but I hate it in a sense where I want it to be better. I know that most of my writing is pretty substandard, if not standard. And that's what I like about it. I like my dialogue a lot. But I still hate it in some way. And the value in understanding all those roles is you could also see what you need. And then some people will tell you what you need. Some people will tell you the script sucks, you really need to go back and figure that out. Or then you might go, I might need a writer. Or somebody will tell you that everything's all over the place, and this needs to be locked down and construed into something sensible. That will probably be more of you getting a producer or putting on your producer hat at least. And that'll go through feedback loops. People will be able to tell you some things because you can really tell. You can even tell on certain finished movies that people just didn't work together well. Either the director and the actors, or two actors against each other. Very few times does the camera fake it really well. That chemistry isn't there. You could see when it's not. It's very easy to see. But the other part of this is that you will also enable the strategy of what you need as far as production, and as far as if you need a studio to fund that. Because not everybody does these things for free. The Directors Guild has a pay list. They go down all the way to ultra low budget. PGA has one too. The Screen Actors Guild has one as well. You can look up. I think Screen Actors Guild is $175 a day for the ultra low budget scale, and there's still a bunch of different layers on top of that too. So it's one of those things that, if you're starting to do this professionally, you start needing these roles to be professional, understand what that means financially. There are levels for the lowest possible budget they'll accept, as far as the PGA, the DGA, and SAG, and as all the other trades too, if you're doing this physically, but it will cost something. And it isn't necessarily expensive. It's not necessarily cheap. Film is one of those things that could vary really wide. But an AI, in the sense is that you would hire somebody on for these things, a lot of the time that'll be your only expenses. So that's where it does have value in AI productions, but understand that your compute will only be part of your financial need. There will also be labor. And, the other meat and potatoes of this is production. I mean, for physical production, you have to have at least a camera, a light, a microphone, a recording device for that microphone, or the microphone records on its onboard, a location, and an actor, and somebody to press record, which could also be that same person who's an actor. That same person is an actor, who's a director, who's a producer, who's also the cinematographer. But you at least need something in front of the camera and somebody to operate the camera, and then that is all of production. Even you don't even need the light, and the camera is only there's components to it as well. Like, you can have a tripod, you don't have to. You can go handheld. There's all these different ways of making all this. And with animation, you need an animator. You need a story to animate, which is also true with physical. You need a story to put in front of, unless you're doing a documentary. And an AI, a lot of the time, you can almost make all that up as it's going along. It's almost the most live version of everything. because you really, as long as you have something to prompt and it makes sense to whatever it is you're already making, you can successfully make a story. Um, Even, I mean, if you look in film, there's films that have absolutely no dialogue but are an hour or 2 hours. I think one of them with no dialogue is like 7 hours long. And it's no dialogue, but it's all actors emoting things in various locations in front of a camera. Um, and that is a story, you know? So this is the thing about these physical productions, is that if you want to go beyond any of these things, and even AI productions and animation, you need to go beyond the basics of whatever it is you're doing. That's where the different levels of what you want to accomplish and how makes sense. The other part about production, when you're talking on the AI sense, is that these companies that give you compute, that are, even if you're part of the CPP, these are, there's value to those. Like you can balance the value of whatever those compute hours are towards your budget, where it costs you this much, and understanding what that budget is great, because it'll help you be able to access other people down the line to maybe give you something towards that budget if you know how much it costs you to do some things. And there's even grander ways I'm looking into, as far as them being almost being promissory notes and going on from there to see if you can get budget otherwise, because a lot of this stuff is banks and loans and all this other stuff as far as physical production, even doing it on your own. A promissory note is holds a lot of water with financial institutions. So if you can figure out a way to make happen for your AI production, there might even be ways of financing AI productions that way. But the thing about those, you need to be able to get to that, and that's where CPPs are great. And if you're in a CPP, it's the only way I recommend to try and approach this, without a lot of financial risk, because it's at least if you get 5,000 or so credits and something costs 60 credits per, at least what your ceiling is for how much you need to get done between A and B. And that's where maybe some of these other people, getting them involved in your production, might help you, because if you don't know how to get from A to B, and they're at least cognizant on how AI production works, which is a little niche right now, that will be majorly helpful. That will be something that will be a component that'll help you do more with whatever it is you're doing. And that's the really meat and potatoes of production, and getting the financing for it. But financing on its own is the most major common challenge of all of production, which is why I mentioned the CPPs, because it's almost getting greenlit for your own film, is getting into one of those, because you can literally do what you need to do with those systems and do it for free. It's absolutely insane. It's not free, it costs somebody. But getting involved in these programs is a lot similar to way back in the day, just getting onto productions and getting involved in them, getting to be a PA, getting talked into the camera department, just, being a laborer and just working your way up in the system. It's almost the best way to get in. These days, it just accelerates you to, you're now the creator of everything.
They basically become patrons to your project, like, in a big way. Over the last 2 years or more now that Chris and I have been working on stuff and kind of navigating CPPs and testing credits and stuff like that on different platforms and things like that. Like I've been and sponsorship from entertainment too. I've been lucky to be able to make a number of projects that have gone off and done some different things and different avenues. So, I mean, it is totally possible to budget that stuff out and time that stuff out. Sometimes, I would say early on, it was very much like brute forcing things and pushing stuff out. Now I'm a little bit more metered, I suppose, trying to think about how this stuff fits into my kind of larger schedule of releases. Because I would say, like, 2024, I didn't necessarily have the same demands in terms of publishing. And then last year, obviously, like the monthly schedule of audiobooks was, impossible. And it drew down my ability to work on video stuff. I got a few things turned out last year, but nothing like starting, the first half of this year, getting the national parks documentary turned out and finished. And that was, again, like a result of sponsorship and CPPs to be able to work on all those clips and stuff over the course of, a year and a half, let's say. So, I mean, it is possible, if you're patient and you're willing to kind of run things again. Sometimes the technology advances over the course of a year and a half, and the clips that you have at the beginning compared to the clips that you could generate, today aren't the same. So you have to kind of keep up with some of that. And sometimes they hold up and they're good. And you can get them upscaled, like even if they're years old at this point. Kind of surprising. Like there's Gen 3 stuff that I still really like. I think so long as it resolution quality wise is made to look clean, then to me, I don't see a problem with it.
Well, hell yeah. And I mean, this is the thing about it is the most common challenge of everything. And it exists in all production, but it has to do with the idea of perfectionism. Overcoming perfectionism and it goes hand in hand with procrastination, because perfectionism is just a form of procrastination. But there's also procrastination too with doing absolutely nothing. And this is the thing about making any of these projects in any day and age. I was once on a project that the year we filmed it, we were using 1080p cameras. They weren't even RAW, so the bit rate was a little shitty. But it was 1080p cinema camera at the time, really shit hot for the day. 2 years later, when the film comes out, 4K cameras have started to come into the fold and have already started the buzzword around it, where that 1080p short, well, it wasn't a short, it was like a short feature, was not going to go anywhere because it was, compelling. It wasn't compelling on a technical level for a lot of the people who wanted to distribute it, because they didn't feel like it worked on these type of systems. They weren't going to put any money towards any work to do post on it, to do it any further. They just liked the project and they wanted to own it. We didn't even know what they wanted to do with it, and they weren't even clear on that as well. The thing about anything that starts to get into your mind about that, you need to just kind of shut it off and figure out what it is the most accessible way to do it that you're willing to accept. If you're going for major production, you're going for major distribution, then you need to understand what that entails. And your perfectionism does not help that. It only hinders it. The idea of the perfect thing to complete and the perfect way to distribute it doesn't exist. It just is a matter of what works for that project at that time. And the same thing works for what you do in production. When you get I'm literally doing this as we have this space. If something works and it works well enough in a shot, that's what you need to use. It's so difficult for me to say, because I've been on both sides of this, where I've toiled with something so long that it didn't even matter anymore that I made it. And there's other parts that I've just gotten something out so quickly that I see the imperfections of. And honestly, if it was better, it would have been somewhat better received, or at least I tell myself that as the insanity ensues. The other part of this is getting something out into the world is the most important aspect of it, because that's when it really becomes the thing. The audience makes it the thing. The movie The Thing wouldn't be the thing without the audience that watched it both times, because it was a remake. or 3 times, because it was remade 3 times. And the third time, we found out how much we really didn't like their version of the thing, because that third time, I think, was the end of it. But the aspect of what it is that we make in production, perfection. If you're at a big studio production and they don't care how many takes it is, get your perfect shot, really use that time up. Don't piss off your crew and your cast, but do whatever it is within that time that you possibly can and really fill that space. And the same thing with AI. If you're really chasing after something, you could find another way to do it. Just figure it out. It's problem solving. It's the most important aspect of all of production is problem solving. Because whether you're doing a physical production, an animation, or an AI, you will always need to problem solve. I tweeted it out earlier this week because it's reality. Like brass knuckles, I found out you can't, no matter what I try, they will not allow for it to happen. Or if I try and use a certain combination of words for it, it doesn't come out as brass knuckles. It comes out as some weird looking gold thing. And I'm not doing that. So I pivot and I make the same scene with a different prop and get the same outcome that I want from it. Those things happen in production. There was a time where somebody wanted a dolly zoom. We were like, you're not going to get a dolly zoom. We don't have the equipment at the time. It's not going to work. I had to be a cinematographer and first AD that day because it was just the way the schedule worked out. And, we ended up doing exactly what they wanted with a different shot that ended up being better for the end result. And the shot looked better. The situation was the heightened from the shot we chose, and it didn't cost us 3 hours of setup time to do all this. It was all just like one shot, took 45 minutes to set up, properly light and get everyone in place. And then the next shot was in the same space, just further down the hall. We literally just shifted a bunch of things down. It took us less than 20 minutes to set it up. And it's exactly the 2 components they wanted in the shot. And those things, those moments that happen, they happen throughout. And the idea that there's a more perfect one of it is kind of crazy, because when you get it, you get it. And that feeling does hit you. It does kind of smack you in the face that, like, I think that was the one, and you feel it. And even if you don't feel it, getting close enough to that is as best as probably you can hope for. Don't waste too many credits, like trying to chase after an image, especially, or a video, especially seed dances, how much it costs. Like if you're in a CPP, you only have a certain amount of credits, like really budget your credits properly. Where if a shot is not working, really get away from it as far as you can, and while still maintaining the story. And then also, if you're doing something that has nonfiction to it, don't get lost in the historical information and all the research from it. I mean, like, I've gone really deep into some projects and it's not that they were nonfiction. It's just I've gotten deep into so many fiction projects that have steeped realities in our reality that I've gone way deep, like mithril religions and ancient things and gods coming from stones and how that all comes together and how it all separates and where is it and physical. Like I did crazy things with that research. And thankfully it's a film that I want to really do as a long-term project. But that could really paralyze a lot of people because, I mean, even with King Washington, I looked into a couple of different things about Washington. And I started reading some really cool shit, and I was just like, I need to slow down because I just need to make the story, which I'm probably going to end up remaking that because of what Michael said. Like, nowadays, I can make that story way better and way more interesting than the way I was able to do it then. And that's the other part about why these different aspects of production are important, because I know how to be on a physical set. But I'd rather make like an AI short about King Washington a little bit better so that maybe I could be on a set that day, for that. But those are the aspects of like these common challenges that we all face in making any type of production. It's one of those things that perfectionism can strike anyone, anywhere, at any time. Even if you don't consider yourself a perfectionist, you could become one. Especially if it's about a certain subject matter, because we get really emotional about these things as creators. And then, just getting to that idea, like the risks we were talking about, don't let the amount of time it takes to make a production, don't let the risk of how much it's going to cost versus how much you're going to get return. That's these are the things that make procrastination just even easier because, it costs me so much. Like, that's why I ended up so dedicated that I need to make stuff with AI this year because I've spent so many years trying to chase after figuring out how to get on set where I didn't make anything of worth without getting on set. And I have all these opportunities in front of me to do so. You got to take what you can get, you know? So I like, these are the things about like the physical production, the animation production, the AI production. You need to have the basics in order to make whatever it is you need to make. Every one of those different stages has different needs to get that same aesthetic. Physical, it's going to be very hard to get the same things you're going to get physically as you can get with AI without spending a massive amount of money. Um, but there are things with physical that happen way easier with actors and with tone and with reaction, light that AI doesn't really produce all that well perfectly every time, especially as you go more genre and you want to try out more aesthetic. Like I could tell you, I've been writing anthropomorphic banana for about the last month, and sometimes it gets it, sometimes it gives me a guy in a banana suit, which is what I would have been. So it gets it on a base level. But that's something that very simple. Like I have to make a banana that has a mouth and eyes with wearing sunglasses and a detective outfit speak on a very frequent basis. And AI doesn't always figure it out, you know. But on a production that would be way easier, even though it would cost way more to do. So you want to balance all these things out, balance out how much it means to your life. Like you're going to have a major time investment life wise into this if you're doing it physically, or even if you're doing it with AI. Like I'm spending hours a day just generating and fighting the system and battling with these different things. So it's all to say that you need to balance this out with what it is you're making, and then also balance this out with how professional you want it to be, and balance that out with your deadlines and your goals. Because the tighter you make those deadlines and goals, the more professional you want this to be, the harder you want to work towards getting a budget for it. Could mean that you'll never make this project. But the looser you can be about these different aspects, and then the more open you are to the world, like Michael was talking about, that those ideas will enable more of that world to help you and support you do this. Getting those community, those beta readers, those beta watchers, if it's the script, beta readers, and then become beta watchers. It's all about getting that support to make those productions happen. And I mean, it's the basics of it. And I think the value that I want people to take away is that no matter what you want to do, I don't not believe in your project. You want to make it physically and you think I'm an AI guy, come at me. Like it'll be a great opportunity to like tell you how to do this, how I would do it this way. It's one of those things that no matter how you want to make it, it's the right way. Just go and make it, because because ultimately, and what I'm trying to keep in mind today is I'm very tired. I have a gout flare up. I got puppies to deal with. My kids have been wonderful, but they're so difficult to deal with. Like I'm still trying to push through this because I'm having fun with some of these shots and just having fun watching them come out. I'm in an action sequence, so everything is fun at this point. And I'm going to have at the end of this somebody chewing somebody out. So I can't wait to do that because those are always fun scenes too. So, the idea of production should always be you're having fun with whatever it is that you want to make. It's work, but it's fun work. You know, I mean, that's ultimately, if you can get to that point mentally, that's the best place to be.
How are you feeling? Are you thinking that we have managed to get through everything?
Well, I was going to say that, but I'm trying to be conversational. So
Yeah.
I'm letting you, have the floor if you wanted to add anything to that. But yeah, I mean, I'd be down for anyone because we've had a good number of people want to come up. So we can do that, or, if you have any finishing thoughts, and then we do that.
No, I think that's fair. It's reasonable. Yeah.
So yeah, because I see King Tut wanted to come up and Tom wanted to come up a little earlier. But, this is the thing about production. It's, is there something that helped you guys? Is there something that ultimately supports you guys? It's always good to know.
King Tut on stage.
All right, good, because it's flipped for me. What's up, bro?
Hey, what's up, guys? Great stuff. And Sorry, I didn't know you guys were kind of doing this conversational thing. I probably want to raise my hand, but you guys had some really good information that you're pushing out. Um, One thing I wanted to comment on was you guys were saying that there are different aspects of uh, AI filming versus traditional filming, and having all of these different people that are involved in creating a movie, right? Like, of course, at the end of a movie, like there's just this long list of credits, which is insane, right? And to think that one person will be able to do it with AI now as just a tool, it starts to feel like a myth to me as I do this more and more. Because what I find is that like AI will trip up in so many different spaces, and the more you know about the particular part that you're playing, so like if you need better character acting, you have to talk to somebody who knows what it means to actually have better character acting, and then convert that into prompt so that like you can go into the details of, oh, how do the face look, right? What kind of gestures are they making? What kind of sound? How are they saying their verses? And it's the same thing with the sound. It's the same thing with character design. Like all of it, it's like all of those things that come in credits are just, they're the AI just gives you a shortcut that kind of sucks. But it sucks because it's really hard to maintain that kind of detail until somebody comes in and is like, hey, you should really do your cuts like this, right? You should do these kinds of scenes like this. And you translate those into prompts. And I 100% agree that like the more, like if you can get somebody in your, like to help you with whatever you're creating that is that has expertise in those areas, the better your thing will be. And you'll move that much faster. Cause like a lot of times, like I just don't even know what's what, right? Like I don't know, I didn't know what a transition was until somebody pointed it out that like my transitions were too hard, right? But I think you guys made that super clear, and I loved how you guys were talking about that.
Well, the other part of it is that it's also the opposite way, because if you know who Mike Judge is, he's the guy who created Beavis and Butthead, and when he started out, he hired a company to animate it, and they did a worse job than he would do. So then he was like, I'm doing it myself from now on. And I think for a number of years when Beavis and Butthead started out, he was doing almost all the art himself until a certain point that I just think it became out of hand and they were just going to do whatever he wanted them to do. So, it was one of those things like sometimes it also helps you know what you don't need.
It does. Like, and I think as long as you know the kind of vision you're trying to have, a lot of times, like I'll spend a crap load of times just trying to do things, and I'll just work myself out until I just can't. I don't even finish the project anymore, which sucks, right? Because I put all that work in, and I'm not even able to like put the thing out. And I think AI has kind of made it worse for me because I think like putting a good piece together, like even if it's just like a 10 to 20 seconds is like not too bad. But as soon as it starts becoming like 1 minute, then it's like, well, now I got to deal with all of the stitching and editing, which becomes like the hardest part, and the organizing. Like you got to organize all your shots. You have this image in your head. You got to go write it down. And it's like, I always think I can do it faster than I should. And then it frustrates me. And then the organization becomes something else. And then if I am like burning credits on bad generations, that makes it even worse. And it becomes so frustrating and I get anxious, right? But then it's like, I just need to like chill out and do the small things that I can. And it's hard to know where that line is. And sometimes it just takes kind of stepping back from like doing the work that you're doing. But I do think you're right that like, if you've got a vision, sometimes like the cut stuff that I was talking about, like the transitions, I didn't know what transitions were, but I just created the thing and I thought the thing was good. But I think if I knew, now that I know, like I probably wouldn't have let it go. I probably would have like tried to make better transitions, and it probably would have either made it worse or like taken that much longer or frustrated me, and then like I might have quit at some point. But
Well, it's interesting is that you should always go with whatever it is you feel is strongest about. And I go through this all the time, but even with that like inner circle I have, there are times I go against it. And I mean transitions is one of those things that's hard for me not to. Because on one hand, I know from doing client work that transitions are usually really frowned upon and they're considered kitschy and they're not considered professional. On the other hand, when I see it done, I appreciate it every time I see it, especially an older video. Like I'm doing a 1980s inspired show, but I don't do any of the transitions because it is really like it's off-putting to my audience. And this is where, the balance of sometimes getting more people involved helps you or hinders you, where you have to really make a decision, especially as a solo creator. Do I want more people to want to watch this? Or do I want the people who appreciate the things that I do, who will watch this, who maybe will watch this, appreciate them even further? And it's a hard decision to make because it's not a matter of selling out. It's always a matter of like, who do you really want to watch this and who do you really like? How does that really look to you?
yeah, that's wisdom right there, man. When you're trying to create stuff, a lot of times like you've got this image in your head, and so I'm one of those people that I try to automate a lot of the stuff that I do. I mean, that is my normal job. I do AI automations, not necessarily for creating videos and stuff, but for businesses. And so I really like Comfy a lot because if you're trying to imagine like a music video, and maybe you want to splice in some content from social media somewhere, you could come up with some way to do it in Comfy UI. Whereas like you can then automate that process and be able to do that over with like different shots and different places. Whereas like, the places like Runway are, I think, again, I haven't been in Runway for a while. But it was like, it was so generic that a lot of times you can create the workflow in Comfy and then Runway would come out with it like 3 months later or something like that. But the problem with that now is like when you step away from Comfy, then you have to come back now and refigure out how to do stuff. And that just takes so much time when you're just trying to get stuff out. And I think you said it earlier that you should favor or at least lean towards the idea of you pushing stuff out rather than like trying to create the perfect thing. And so I'm like, well, I probably should just, use the simple stuff and use what I get there, because I think that will help me push things out a lot faster than trying to always create a workflow and then that breaks. Now you have like two different brains that you're going in between, right? And something that I really wanted to hear from you guys was like, what does your process look like? Like, have you guys got it down to like a T in terms of the sections? Like, is it pre-production has XYZ, and then, you've got the middle part where you need, 1, 2, 3, and then the ending. Because I'm always trying to think in that way, but I don't know if that's even a good way of doing it. But again, like I kind of probably need to leave these kinds of, thinking and just start creating. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to figure stuff out, in chunks before I even like create the thing.
Yeah. I think for me, everything I'm doing is kind of non-linear, pretty unsequenced. The ideas can kind of come from anywhere, and also you might have ideas about different things at any given time, and you really kind of got to document that when it comes up. So you just need to give yourself the tools, kind of the landscape of devices or software or whatever to capture your thinking and development processes along the way, so that feels like going downhill nice and easy. that for me is like always having like notes, stuff to write, or having um, places where I keep notes that are distributed across all my devices, so that like whenever I'm working on the set of notes for a project, or if I'm keeping like research and links and stuff like that for a project together, then I keep that all in one place, so that like anytime I find something, I can put it together with everything else that exists for that project. So I think making just really good kind of like personal habits about that ends up making projects easier to manage and to work on over time. We are getting like dangerously close to the end of the program though, and I brought up Professor Lazarus just to let him say something before we wrap up the program, so I don't want to talk for too long. But yeah, Professor, if you have some thoughts or a quick question that we can get to before the last couple of minutes here.
What's up, Bob?
Yeah, so no, just the YouTube thing, because I do have a YouTube channel, and because of that, I've been researching the whole demonetization apocalypse. So I just wanted to bring a little clarity, just because obviously people are losing their channels as far as getting demonetized. But what I've noticed in my research is there's usually like two things that are consistent. Because the vague phrasing is inauthentic content, right? So what does that mean to YouTube? And basically what I see happening is either if it's like a two-dimensional, like a 2D animation that's AI that is easily repeated, like, these channels that do the same, the history that you can fall asleep to over and over again. It's like a different history story, but it's clearly like the same formula repackaged over and over again. And it's clearly an AI voiceover, and it's clearly scripted with ChatGPT and no edits. You know what I'm saying? Like if YouTube can tell that there's no human element whatsoever, like if you just plug in to, a Claude or ChatGPT to have it print out a script for you, then, you can tell that it's written by AI because they have different, the AI uses different patterns to write text, right? So they have other AI that can tell that AI was used to write that text. So if you're only scripting with AI, YouTube can tell you're only scripting with AI. So I would recommend that, you just add a human element, or, use your own voice instead of the 11 Labs voice. If you mix in a human element, you're usually good on that front. The other side of the inauthentic content discussion is the same old copyright infringement. A lot of the channels that I see getting taken down, it's really a copyright infringement case. And YouTube has always moved the goalpost there, right? The strike system and so on and so forth. And that's what I think is really unfair about it, is that they don't warn people. So like Chris said, I would be cautious. Like I wouldn't, listen to one of these internet gurus who's telling you to just jump in Claude and have everything automated for you. I think that's how people are getting in trouble, is 100% automation. But, if you're bringing something new to the story each time you post a story, as long as you're not reposting the same formulaic content over and over and over again, you should be okay. I've been okay so far. I'm not posting regularly. I do have my shorts on a different channel, but they've been fine. They're completely made in AI. They're completely made in Dreaming. And, I haven't gotten flagged yet. I'm knocking on wood there just because I know how Wild West it is in these YouTube streets. But that's nothing new. Like I said, if you think that, you can bring something original to your 2D animations, if you're telling an original story and it's not infringing on any copyright and you're not just repeating the same thing over and over again, your AI YouTube content should be okay. But that's all I just wanted to add there.
Oh, that's a good point. But I mean, even from what you said, like the same idea, don't rely on it. Just do what you got to do. If you can bring something to it, bring something to it. But otherwise, just be cautious.
Yeah. Well, for today, we're going to wrap it up. So up above in the nest, if you aren't in there yet, all the way to the right is a link to our Discord server. You can share your work, talk tools, see some of the things that we feature of our own material as well. Come and hang out. Session from a month ago is up on podcast platforms. You can check that out from Speaker Cone. shared that out. For the Love of God is in pre-order. It's going to come out June 23rd. That's my newest short story coming out in 1 month, just over 1 month, just barely over 1 month. New podcast with author Sam Robb up there from Raconteur Press. He actually has a book going out on Celine. That's what we're promoting there. Base book sale started yesterday. I got a bunch of stuff in there. A few things on sale. You might have a look. Take a chance. Cheap books, if you like them. A lot of them. It's a huge sale, actually. This particular time around, there's just a lot of people participating. Speaking of books, Anunnaki: Origin of Sumeria came out 1 year ago this month. Really, right now. So it's basically 1 year old now. Imagine that. Tom LaRock came up and shared a new video also for Have Mercy. If you haven't checked that out, take a look at Tom's video. That'll about do it for today. You can look for this recording in 1 month's time up on all of your favorite podcast platforms. Chris, back to you.
Can you guys drop the link to the Discord and the Purple Pill? Would that be a thing?
Can you not see it on the Nest?
I don't.
Oh, it's all the way on the right. It's the post all the way on the right on the Nest. AI Film Gorillas. Do you see it there?
I'm putting in the Purple Pill. Give me 1 second.
All right. Nice. Yeah, Chris will do it. I'm like rigged up right now. I'm like in the space station to record this session. So it's very difficult for me to be able to manage that for you simultaneously. Sorry.
I knew what Michael was doing. He was looking at, no, I can't do that. But yeah. So we, the Film3, want you to have a really kick-ass Thursday and have a great weekend. This is the idea of production. It should be fun. It should be something you want to do. It should be something you want to continue doing. It shouldn't be something that's, making you sad to create, So have fun. Do it at your behest. Figure out how professional, how tight your schedule, how loose your schedule, how much professionalism, what your audience wants, and then give it to them. Thank you guys for hanging out. And it'll be another month till we have another workshop, but we'll see you guys next week with more probably discussion space. We'll see what also happens in the next week. It's been crazy. Omni's out. All sorts of crazy stuff's going on. So good luck. God bless. Have a great day. Have a great weekend.